Hello everyone, my name is Mindy Vincent and welcome to another episode of Therapeutic Madness. Today we have our lovely co-host Justin Areola with us.
Yeah.
Welcome Justin! And we have a very special guest, my favorite doctor ever. Well, I have two favorite doctors. You'll meet the next one on the next episode actually, interestingly enough. But this is Dr. Robert Simpson. And I have to tell you about how I met Robert. So my friend Tyler Hansen, who is on my board at
Skittles.
UHRC, yep, Skittles, shout out to him. He's going to punch us later for that. So he had been telling me about this Dr. Simpson. And so I make arrangements to meet with Dr. Simpson for lunch at the Tin Angel. And I'm thinking that I'm meeting like this old white Mormon guy because that's what we have here. And so I'm waiting at the Tin Angel and in walks him, and he's English, you'll hear him talk. And he's all, excuse me, I can't do great accents, but he's like, who is Mindy? And I'm like, oh, that would be me. And he's like, oh, hello. And like he immediately starts talking my language, which is talking about like not doubting meetings and like it was a bloody mess. And I was like, I fucking love this guy. And he's sleeved, which how many doctors do you know that are sleeved, right?
It should be pre-rack.
Well, I think it should be too. I think it should be too. So anyway, so this is Dr. Simpson.
I'm pleased to be here.
We're so excited to have you.
Yeah.
So Dr. Simpson, tell us, we're going to call him Robert because even though he's a doctor and he's earned that title, he actually doesn't really like being called that much. He always tells me to call him Robert. So Robert, tell us about what you do.
What I do?
What in the hell do you do? We want to hear some of your personal stories too. Yeah.
So
I feel like English people have special kind of stories to
we
share.
do, yeah. We do.
And if you've ever been around an English person in recovery, they all have the message to carry. Just ask them. They should be put up for speaker meetings if they're visiting in town every night that they're here. It's so funny. I love all of my English people in recovery, and they're also very funny.
There's some madness, isn't there?
There is, but you know we love madness. This is Therapeutic Madness.
It's about. So at the moment, I run a little medical clinic that is devoted to the treatment of people who have addiction.
What is the name of your clinic, sir?
Utah Addiction Medicine, which is very imaginative.
And it's in like this really cool house up in Holiday.
It is, yeah. It's right on Highland Drive.
Yeah.
And it's an old farmhouse, and we made it kind of as undoctory as possible.
Damn it, Chris.
In keeping with the remainder of my image.
The remainder of your image.
What's left of it.
We're going to get into that in part 2.
And it's really nice. It's a great spot. Feels like a home, and you know the stigma works both ways. I mean, as addicts, I'm also a guy in recovery. We face stigma from the medical community, right? And
what? There's stigma in the medical community? What the hell are you talking about, Robert?
Not in Utah. Nowhere else.
Not in Utah especially. What kind of stigma do you speak of?
This stigma of which I speak, it's just perceived as moral failing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's just we need more willpower. Just kind of get your act together and put it down, stop it.
Yeah.
Right?
Pull it together, man.
Please. So
Put that
we
bitch
open
back in the closet.
Right?
Like the rest of us.
That's true too.
So we sort of work with folks who kind of on the full spectrum of recovery, from recovery curious people to forms of harm reduction to people who've been in recovery for long periods of time and just want to have their medical care delivered in that environment.
That's great.
I love that. At UHRC, we go with the definition of recovery, that recovery is any state of being that is better than the one you were in before.
I like it.
I know.
That's
I
cool.
love that.
Yeah.
Shout out to my friend Patrick Rezak, founder of One Voice Recovery. That is I love Patrick. That is one of, that's a thing that he has always said. And as soon as I heard him say that, I was like, so that's stolen.
Yeah.
And it's still stolen, bitch.
But it's still good. I mean, it's still a good credit.
It is.
Yeah.
And so, but you just said a term that I've never heard before, recovery curious or something. Did you say recovery?
Yeah, recovery curious.
Yeah.
That was cool.
I was like,
I noticed that too.
tell us what the hell that is.
Well, I mean, it's sort of that spectrum spectrum of kind of pre-contemplative people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure that I want to stop, but my wife certainly wants me to.
Right, right.
I'm not sure I want to stop, but the police department definitely want me to.
Right?
Right.
So do the neighbors, the schools. Like, that's why when
Yeah.
people are in recovery and they're like, you know, I really don't like people to know I'm in recovery. I was like, you know, it's best for society, the news, like people in general to know that I'm in recovery. The community will feel like a safer place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so I don't
right.
understand not sharing that information.
Can't imagine how much safer it is out there with the three of us in here,
Correct?
right?
Definitely.
Correct. Especially this fucking guy.
You guys are lucky.
So we get to do a broad variety of things, and we do. I mean, I'll meet with people for sometimes weeks before they decide, oh, I'd like to, try something.
Yeah.
And just kind of getting a sense of who they are, and building rapport, and understanding where they've been and what their challenges are.
Right.
You know what they have to work with, what are the salient pieces in their life, and getting to know them, and trying to establish rapport and trust of the medical establishment.
It's a big step when you've been calling the shots. Well, even if you're homeless and you're on the street, you're calling all your shots, right? To come to somebody and say, okay, I'm ready
Yeah,
to get better.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and trusting that those providers are going to be kind and gracious, because our systems are set up to punish people who use drugs, whether that be for recreational purposes, whether it's because they're addicted.
Yeah.
Our systems tell people, and you'll be able to speak to this, like for instance, methadone
For sure.
treatment, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about medication-assisted treatment in a second, because that's a big thing that Robert does. But one of the things about medication-assisted therapy is that if people test positive for like sometimes other substances, or if they're not attending the number of groups that, this certain
Right.
organization requires people to attend, then they cut them off
Which makes
of their
no
methadone.
sense.
Would you ever do that to a diabetic? Like, you ate a Twinkie, you fat fuck, and now you will not have insulin. How about that? And
Yeah.
if you will just start behaving correctly, we might give you your insulin back.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, maybe.
And in the meantime, we're also going to take your kids, your housing, you're fired from your job.
Yeah.
And maybe if you just wanted it bad enough, you'd get it. You'd stop eating those fucking Twinkies.
Yeah.
So like, why,
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that
It
we
is.
treat people with,
And there's no other area in medicine in which we say, well, look, you have to stop before we'll treat you, right? So
Yeah.
you wouldn't go into a pulmonologist's office dragging your oxygen bottle and a couple of packs of ciggies in your pocket, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't give you any inhalers until you stop smoking those cigarettes, right? I mean, it just wouldn't happen.
right,
As soon as you stop bleeding, we'll patch you up.
That's
Right.
it. All bleeding stops eventually.
Yeah.
But
probably true.
it's a peculiarity, right? And you can sort of argue disease, not disease. I don't know that in the end it really matters. It's got ICD-9 codes or ICD-10 codes, so fine. It's certainly a medical condition, and as such, I mean, it needs treatment at all stages, and whether
Absolutely.
people are pre-contemplative or whether they're in the process of change and, and things come up pass on them for one reason or another, or people who've been in long-term recovery of one sort or another, and then things come unstuck. It's incredibly difficult for a lot of those folks to find where to go, where they won't be judged. There won't be a lot of kind of preconceived notions about, who they are or what they did or that they're,
Right.
yeah,
Or thrown into the system that they don't want to be part of.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
a big thing here in Utah.
it's a huge thing here, I would say too.
Yeah.
So, tell me, there's a couple things I want to know about.
Mm-hmm.
One, I want to know about how you feel about the disease concept, because last week we had a guest on the podcast, Zach Rhodes, who is the co-author of the book by Dr. Stanton Peele, Outgrowing Addiction.
Uh-huh.
And it's about the developmental theory of addiction. And I'm actually much more of a prescriber to that theory, because I've watched for myself, like when I look at the group of people that like I ran with for years and years, right?
Yeah.
Like we all cooked meth and did crazy outlandish things, right? And only like a couple of us ended up, most of us went through jails and prisons, but everybody, only a couple of us had to go through treatment, had to get into AA for years and years, right? Like,
Right.
most of them grew out of addiction. And I
Right.
also believe I grew out of addiction, and then it just so happened to be during the same time that I was in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? So I was wondering, like, what your, like, thoughts are on that, and then I want to get into, like, medication-assisted therapy. Like, tell us about what the hell that is, but we'll get to that in a second. Hold on, everyone. I asked too many questions at once.
So
All the time.
I mean, the first one, I think, I've certainly given talks supporting the disease model just based on genetics and early childhood experience, early exposure, environmental things, and it meets criteria in that way.
Right.
But I think one could easily make the argument that given the right genetic loading and exposure, that it's an associative memory problem, right?
Yes,
That we get into,
like an overlearned habit.
Yeah.
That's how I describe it too. It's an overlearned habit. And if you think about how the reward system in the brain, like,
Yeah.
so you're having this, discomfort, whether it even just be anxiety, right? But that shot of tequila, when it hits, it's like, that's
Right.
very rewarding. And then it makes it a very easy thing to do over and over. And it's also something you always know the result of how it's going to be for you.
It's fairly predictable.
Yes.
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 It is, and so what's fun with with the MAT piece is that what we can do is help provide an anchor for people to just kind of have a reboot for a minute, right?
Yeah.
And then interestingly enough, what happens is they form newer and healthier associations with people, places, and things, and they may not need long-term support. They may. It varies. But I think one of the things that's impressed me a lot from different authors and groups is that we've lumped addiction kind of all together. Addiction's addiction.
Yes.
And
even though we know, even just from adverse childhood experiences alone, like
Right.
how vast and different are people's just upbringings and
Absolutely.
traumas and we know that is a piece that leads into addiction, right? May or may not, because
Right.
not everybody who has trauma ends up an addict either, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's just funny that you'd lump them in when we just from that one little tiny piece alone, we can see how much there's just so much diversity in people's experiences.
Yeah, and kind of getting at what's underneath it. I mean, this is the importance. It's not a short process, but I mean, this is why sitting down with people for periods of time, we can really kind of get their backstory and where they came from. And a lot of people have, suffered anxiety, depression, other, mental illness for many, many years before they ever find substances.
Yeah.
Quiet their head down.
Right.
And then the substance itself becomes a problem and, it just compounds. But really, the target's the underlying condition. I mean, the immediate target's preventing them from dying while we're sorting all that out.
Right.
And
Well, that's what we three think is the primary thing that we should do, but not everyone agrees with us about that. So
Yeah.
I think that we should be keeping people alive as well, regardless of what they're
Yeah.
doing next.
We don't have a great many rules at our place, but rule number one, and I think it's the only rule we have so far, is nobody dies before the next appointment.
Yeah.
So,
Admirable goal, sir.
Yeah.
Admirable.
right? If we're still in the game, then we're still in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can still have a conversation, maybe there's a chance to get well, right?
That's exactly
That's
right.
true. I used to tell my guys in treatment that the only rule is don't run away, because if you run away, there's like nothing I can do to help
There
you.
you go.
Right.
I
Right.
can't help you if you're gone. on
Come
the road.
back.
Yeah.
If you're loaded, come back.
Yeah, come back,
No,
because
no,
then I
you're
can fight
judged.
with you for
Right.
for the courts or EPP to let you stay.
When you see this very punitive structure, right? AP&P, everybody like mess up one time and everything's gone. Right?
Yeah.
You're gone. You're going back to prison,
Mm-hmm.
and so inevitably people fail, and that's when they go. Right? They stop
Yeah.
engaging with everybody because they know, shit, I'm gone.
Yep.
So let's just go off the deep end then, because I'm
That's
going
a-
back.
That is so true. That is so true. When people
Right.
fall in one area, and then when when we as providers don't provide like that safe place where people can have those mistakes and like a net to catch them,
Right.
then you know they often end up with new charges before they go back. You know.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, and then they're looking at way more time.
Absolutely, and a lot of times, you know, just, I mean, it's not the drugs that actually kill us. I mean, approximately, I suppose it is, but it's really just the shame and the isolation and the despair and the guilt and remorse that we carry around. That's what ultimately, you know, brings about the demise of folks. And so that a huge part of what we try to do is just destigmatize our environment.
That's great.
As stigma-free as can possibly be, and we've been incredibly lucky with the providers and folks that have come our way.
Yeah.
With very similar philosophies about, you know, how to look after people over time, and how to chat with somebody who's just, you know, gone off the wagon and been kicked out of the house again and maybe violated and
Yeah, I just lost a friend to that.
Yeah.
Just this week.
yeah, and you know, giving them a chance to settle and kind of perch and just kind of talk and about what's going on and intensify their care rather than saying,
You're out of here.
Get the
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Hey, you had all these problems, so we know you can probably just figure it out on your own. You gotta go, man.
And continuing to believe in our clients when they don't believe in themselves. You know, like
Right.
I know that a lot of people, and all through graduate school, you hear this, you know, you hear the professors say, you can't work harder than the client, but I'm a firm believer that there's oftentimes you have to work harder than the client, you know, because I know in all those years that I was using, especially when you had been using 17 years, there was no evidence I had that could support that I could do anything right. You know, everything that I did, I fucked it up. Everything I ever loved, I hurt, you know, and like I didn't have any evidence to support any other beliefs, you know. And it took people saying, I believe in you and I love you, for me to make any kind of change. And nobody, you know, I mean, even my family was like, well, we fucking don't click, you know, don't call us again.
Yeah.
Good luck in treatment, bitch, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I think as providers, like, it's our duty to believe in our clients when they can't believe in themselves, because how else do you help promote change in people?
Right.
You know?
This is it.
Yeah.
And looking at things, I mean, many times if we kind of go back through and we say, well, let's look at the last few months and how things have gone, you know. And they'll sort of realise, look, I've had 2.5 terrific months. The last couple of weeks, it all spun out on me. But the fact of the matter is that you can do this because we've been doing it. So how do we take the first step to move back in that direction?
And doesn't he sound so calm?
I know, I already feel like, I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do? I'm in a really good place, but I'm like, you were probably right.
What should we work on
What am I
today?
working on?
That's so funny. Okay, we're going to pause to take a break, and then we're going to come right back and we're going to talk with Robert more about what is medication-assisted therapy, why is it so stigmatized in the recovering community, what does it do, how does it work, and how can we support it if we are people who believe in it, which we should, because unless you're a doctor and have a good reason to not, but we'll get into that. So anyway.
Don't start talking science.
Now I would prefer to go with my gut on this one. Okay, so we'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Therapeutic Madness. We have our tall, dark, and handsome co-host, Justin Areola, with us today. And we have our fun little tatted English doctor, Dr. Simpson. We call him Robert, though. So welcome back. So, talk to us some more tell us about medication-assisted therapy.
So, it usually is confined to thinking about opioid replacement therapy, such as methadone, buprenorphine. But I think the reality is that medication-assisted treatment includes antidepressants, anxiolytics,
Cannabis.
Certainly could.
Yeah.
Ketamine. Psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies.
Yeah, I mean, Pollen's book's full of interesting information about psilocybin and, you know, various other neuroactive agents that show some promise.
Yeah.
Shout out to
We really
Pollen.
do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Austin.
Woo, woo.
right?
Yell it
I mean,
louder. No.
we're kind of cavemen right now, right? We're fumbling around with like 3 or 4 tools.
That's true.
And the trouble is we kind of want to apply them all in the same ways.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it just doesn't go that way, right? Because we're all individuals, and you know, and some people want to kind of just have a weekend off and live it up and what have you. And if that's the case, then they return to our clinic. Then it doesn't sort of spark an interrogation of what happened. It's just like, okay, you're back and you're right. We get back started, and and maybe they say yes, and maybe they say I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But they're saying something.
Yeah.
They're
they're
there. You're
talking.
having you're having a
And
conversation.
they're getting treated with respect and compassion that we would
Yeah.
any other patient that we look after.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Not that that's
Love
like and that's not the experience that everybody has with the medical community. Like, I actually had to testify in a court hearing not too long ago for a client, and they were asking me on the stand, like, well, why didn't your client disclose to her doctor that she had had a drug addiction in the past? And I was like, well, why would she? Like, do you know what happens when you tell a doctor that you have a history of substance use? I've been sober for almost 13 years, and my doctor that I have seen for over 10 of those years, if I have something where I require a narcotic medication for what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's a completely medically appropriate time to take it, right?
Sure.
They're like, should you be taking that? Are you sure? And I had a surgeon actually like last week who was like giving me a bunch of shit about getting Zofran. I was complaining about that to you actually when we had lunch, that she was all weird about me getting Zofran. And Zofran is an anti-nausea medication that I have to take if I take a pain medication. I was having surgery, which is a good reason to have a pain medication, right?
Generally speaking,
And so people typically don't ibuprofen. Take a Motrin and hydrate. We just had our vets on, and like they totally
Focus
That's
on the
what we
breath.
got.
yeah,
That's what we
focus on your
got.
breath. The way he says that, like it really sounded like he has said that to somebody before, probably while they were giving birth. My God. So, but people don't typically have, people who are substance users, I'm throwing things around here, don't mind me. But people who have a history of substance use typically don't have a great history with the medical community and don't trust doctors, right? So tell us about what so methadone. You don't do methadone at your clinic, do you?
Don't.
But
not
you can
opposed
still
to
tell
it.
us about methadone.
Yeah, for sure.
And then will you tell us about like Suboxone and Subutex and Vivitrol?
Yep. So that's it's a great way to kind of lay them out, because methadone is what we would call a full agonist. So it binds to the opioid receptor and stimulates it, and in doing so, saturates people's need and desire and hopefully cravings for opioid. And I've had people who I could not get stable on Vivitrol, Vivitrol, or combinations of things, and methadone is what works. There's some people, for whatever reason, whether it's the way they metabolize it, the way their receptors are built, they just work well.
Historical
on that
use
meds.
patterns, those type of things.
Absolutely, yeah. Buprenorphine's kind of in the middle in that it partially stimulates the receptors, so it binds to opioid receptors and it partially stimulates them. And again, in doing so, it alleviates cravings.
Sort of.
As long
What
as it's
about for
dosed
people
properly.
who don't? But what about people who don't really want to get sober and they're being prescribed, like they're having to be prescribed that, like doctors when they cut pain patients off their meds and the patients are not ready to be taken off their meds,
Right.
and they just give them Subutex or Suboxone instead, then it's not as effective, right?
No.
But I just say that because we shouldn't force people to go on medications they don't want to go on.
Yeah.
So go
This
on.
is America.
This is America. But we love to force people, especially with medication-assisted therapy.
Yeah.
We love to force people to do things they don't want to do, and it's part of what killed my sister. Like, that's why I bring it up, because she was prescribed pain medication. She was not ready to get off that pain medication, and they put her on Suboxone, and it did not take her cravings away, and it wasn't strong enough. And doctors are afraid, well, if they're drug-seeking, then give them what they need to not be sick, so that they don't die. Because my sister ended up getting heroin, and the first time she used it, she died of a heroin and Suboxone overdose.
Bless her. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So that's
When you
why.
see that now too, with the big media efforts around, you know, the opioid problem, right? Doctors have started to knee-jerk, insurance companies have started to knee-jerk on covering, you know, long-term opioid prescriptions, and so
Longer than 7 days here in Utah.
Right,
Jesus.
right. So you're seeing these people who are basically being forced to, and sometimes not even wean,
Yeah.
right? And that's where you see people in pain, because that pain is unbearable.
Yep.
And the first place they go is to the street.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and there certainly are legitimate uses for pain
Right.
medication, people who use them as directed.
And for alternatives to pain medication too. Like I was thinking that while you were saying that, it's like how
Supplements.
many people you have helped that have had chronic pain conditions, and how deeply they've been impacted by like this legislation that is meant to target the opioid crisis, but instead it's hurting these people.
Right.
You know, and like they're not being able to, you know, access medications, pain medications. Like, can you imagine being, you know, like some of the people you've helped, and like they, like those people can get to the pharmacy every 7 days to pick up their opiates.
Right.
You know?
You know, the
It's
people that are
real.
homebound, but also, you know, a lot of the pain contracts that we see in the state when we introduce cannabis for some of those patients who want to reduce, you know, some of the prescriptions that they've been on, and oftentimes these docs have, you know, prescribed benzos in combination with opiates, right? So that
Which
increases
is
their
terrible.
overdose risk.
Right?
But then you introduce cannabis and they start to reduce their use,
Yeah.
but then they fail a UA and they lose everything.
Yes, and that actually happens
Right?
at the
And
VA
that's so
the most.
counterintuitive. It's like,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, at the VA it happens the most. Like my cousin right this moment. My cousin, he has all sorts of issues. He's been a disabled vet forever. He was a paratrooper, like, shout out to Steve. And my
we need to do
cousin's...
like Bill and Ted's.
We do! That'll be in the next episode.
Okay.
So Steve, he is prescribed tons of narcotic medication through the VA, and he's not interested in taking any of those. He's already been dependent on them, and so he uses cannabis. And they, unless he will stop using the cannabis, they won't prescribe any of his medications. That is happening today, right this very second.
It does happen. And a lot of times when vets first come back, you know, if they kind of fit into that envelope, they get what we call the combat cocktail. And so, you know, there's if they've had some combat issues,
Yeah.
you know, there's an antipsychotic, there's anti-anxiolytic. If they've had some type of injury, they do have opiates, and so then they have them on some type of antidepressant. And oftentimes they are on so much medication that they have a hard time interacting with their family.
Right. Or
Interacting
advocating
with
for
their
themselves and
spouse, or
saying,
advocating
like,
for
this isn't
themselves.
working for me, and you're
Right.
putting me in a
It's just
dangerous
a-
place.
Or understanding
take
how
these
the
pills
and
medicines
be
interact.
quiet. Right.
Right.
This is the other thing that see people on these massive lists of medications that, you know, no one's ever really kind of gone through it piece by piece
Right.
and said, okay, what's this one doing for you?
Right.
Yeah, what are we
Right.
doing with this?
And if there isn't a, you know, benefit, then it's just risk,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I mean, to a large extent, everything we do in medicine is harm reduction. I mean, whether it's having your cholesterol checked or whether it's,
Right.
you know, whatever it might be, it's all harm reduction. And addiction treatment's no different from that. I mean, we're
Right.
just
Shouldn't
trying to-
It shouldn't be. But so you don't kick people out of your medication-assisted therapy program for utilizing cannabis or for incidences of use in their drug of choice.
No, it becomes a point of conversation. No, there may come points where they're obviously just sicker than we can look after in our environment.
Right. Which is when we refer people to a higher level of care.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe you need to go to residential because we just can't stabilize you here.
Yeah.
And
or-
you might die. Like, because the people we see are truly at risk to die.
Oh,
Like,
no
you know.
question. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's sort of it. It becomes a rather than it being some sort of stopping point, it becomes a point of conversation for where does your recovery process need to go? I mean, where would you like to go from here?
Right.
Yeah.
Because obviously we need some more services, we need some more therapy.
Yeah, we definitely need that. And we need funding to not get monopolized. So,
And more groups like this.
yep, and more groups like Rebel Recovery, where we allow all pathways of recovery. So, because
Right.
recovery should not, even in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says we do not have a monopoly on recovery. Yet people who follow abstinent pathways of recovery absolutely act like they have a monopoly on recovery.
Right.
And what do
That's
you
the only
say, right? And what do you say to those people? Like, because Justin and I, we have heard countless people tell us about how terrible medication-assisted therapy is. It's just a crutch, and
Yeah.
Justin's mom even worked in a methadone clinic, so he felt different about it in the first place. He's like, what? But like that, that's the belief many people have. So what do you say to those
Absolutely.
kind of people?
Yeah.
And being a person in recovery yourself, because you're in abstinence-based recovery, so like, what do people tell you when you're just helping people switch from one drug to another? God, Robert, you're keeping them hooked.
So it's the again, addiction. If you look at the DSM-5, only one of the criteria in there really is about escalating or difficulty controlling drug use, or
Yeah.
the rest are around behaviours that are aberrant, that are involved with getting and maintaining a habit, and so
A dependency, right?
yeah. And so the question becomes, you may be dependent on a medication, but as long as it's being taken as prescribed by a responsible prescriber, then you're in a recovery process.
Right.
The end.
Yeah. So what about, like, how sometimes in 12-step meetings people are like, you don't get to count your clean time because you're on Suboxone or you're on methadone or whatever. Like, what do you say to people like that? And as
Well,
Tribal scorekeeping. It's
right. First of all, it's none of your bloody business.
right.
and the Big Book also says, for all these people who don't know what the Big Book says, I'm a Big Book thumper, and I'm more than happy to tell people what the Big Book says. And it says that we use psychiatrists, doctors, and modern medication because the Alcoholics Anonymous alone is not something that can treat those things. And they've never shied away from it yet. I know people who,
no.
and I know people who, in fact, Bill Wilson used to eat acid, and he was a close buddy with Timothy Leary, and he believed that people could achieve their spiritual experience through LSD if they weren't able to achieve it otherwise. But like, these are important things for people to know, because when they're stigmatizing people and saying, well, Alcoholics Anonymous says this and this and that, well, these people, Alcoholics Anonymous might have been the only kind of meeting or help they could find.
Right.
When you
right.
stop somebody and say, you don't introduce yourself as an addict, we're alcoholics here, you might send somebody out to die that day, and like, that's some serious shit. Can you
Yeah.
imagine if somebody did that to you in a meeting?
Yeah.
So do you sponsor people, and like, what do you say to people who say that kind of shit? Do they even dare say it around you because you're a doctor?
So I do get I belong to a physician's kind of nationwide treatment list served that has all differing opinions about what medications are compatible with 12-step recovery and what have you. But
They have medical opinions about which medications are compatible with 12-step programs?
yeah.
I would really be interested to know how somebody can have a medical opinion of medication and its compatibility with a 12-step program.
Yeah.
Huh, that's really interesting, considering your 12-step program has nothing to do with medicine.
Yeah.
If you're one of those people, I'd love to hear from you. We'll have a conversation.
And also, if you're one of those people and you have somebody that shows up and introduces them as an addict, themselves as an addict, like, that takes guts in itself. Let's not throw those people out. Let's
That's
engage
right.
them. Right.
Right.
That's right. it's about finding community.
Right.
And
They're
it's
looking
about
for
finding
somebody.
a tribe, and however we get there.
And they're looking for help, but they're showing up there for hell's sakes.
Exactly.
I run into people all the time who's, I was on and off Suboxone for a couple of years, and I was messing around, and I was still, shooting dope and what have you. And I don't use it now, and I'm in abstinent recovery. And I said, well, did you ever stop to think that maybe you're in that recovery now because you were on Suboxone for all those years? Even though you may have used heroin, we know that if somebody has a medication like buprenorphine in their system, their likelihood of overdosing is less. So,
Point blank.
that's it.
That's it.
Just
So how does somebody have a medical opinion that it's not effective? Anyway.
It's not so much the not effective, it's kind of just the old school kind of, this is how I did it, and this is how everyone
Which is always grounded in science, right?
Right.
Because people's anecdotal experience is always what we should base our scientific methods upon.
I always have.
Yeah.
That's how we do the standard of care.
Right? Standard of care. That and gut feelings. The guts are that's how we pass policy.
But NA and A have both come out and made position statements that they have no interest in what you use. The third tradition in requirement for membership is a desire to stop using, and then the 10th is...
And anything else is an outside issue, which is against the traditions.
That's it.
Yeah.
So... that's the end of the argument, really, isn't it?
Well, I feel like it is, but...
Pay attention to that.
Yeah, I hope that we'll see the recovery community in general, just be more opening and welcoming to all pathways of recovery, all points along the spectrum, because, these are people and people's lives matter and they inherently have worth, and people do not inherently gain more worth just because they got into recovery.
Yeah.
Like, my worth is not more because I got into recovery. My worth was always there.
Yeah.
I just needed somebody to help me tap into it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a lovely point. I mean, people are worthy of respect and being treated with dignity and care, whether they're using or not, or whatever else they might have going on.
So tell us about Vivitrol. That's the other medication-assisted therapy I think that most people think about when they think about medication-assisted therapy. But oftentimes I think that one gets left off the list because people are like, oh, that's Vivitrol, and it's not a substitution therapy. And so I think sometimes people leave it off.
Which is an interesting thing, because it is, it's a wonderful medicine for some people. And again, individualization of care is really important.
Even with Vivitrol? Mm-hmm. Which I agree with as well. My sarcasm runs deep, right? But it is the thing that courts are going to, especially drug courts, everybody's getting Vivitrol. We're putting everybody on Vivitrol, and Vivitrol isn't for everybody. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about why that is.
Well, so there's a number of reasons, and I don't know that the manufacturer quite understands. But people metabolize Vivitrol in very different ways. So I have people who burn through a Vivitrol injection in 18 days.
Yes, I've seen that too.
And on the 19th day, they shoot heroin.
Yes.
And the problem is they're then not only receptor naive, but they have generated more opioid receptors.
Right.
And so the likelihood of overdosing at that point is actually escalated.
It's even higher.
They're
And
used to their typical dose. They know right where they need to be, but they have all this tolerance loss. And
and people think so Vivitrol blocks alcohol and opiates. It blocks the receptors, right? So people, even if they use, they can't really get high or get drunk. But if somebody doesn't want to be sober and they have Vivitrol in their system, I have seen people use and use and use until they can't get high, and by then you're definitely going to die.
They just forget to breathe.
Yeah. So that's one danger, I guess, to putting people on Vivitrol that don't want to be on Vivitrol.
Absolutely.
But not everybody metabolizes it the same. They're at high risk for overdose when they come off Vivitrol.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't know what the duration of treatment with Vivitrol should actually be. We don't know what the
We're going with our standard 1 year. That's what everybody says for everything in treatment. They're like, 1 year.
Where did that come from?
1 year.
Right?
I don't know, but in AA they also say you can't have sex for 1 year, yet on page 69 it says that we do not get involved in people's sexual conquests or, people's sexual stuff. Page 69, dead serious.
Curious page number.
Yeah.
There's a good page for that.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons that Vivitrol, can be difficult with folks. The other is that I see this kind of drop off at about somewhere between 3 and 5 months, and it's kind of that place where everybody's kind of like, okay, I haven't used it in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months.
Right.
I got this. I don't need to go to those silly meetings. I'm going to stop the Vivitrol, and it all comes kind of horribly unwound.
Right.
Wheels come off.
Yeah.
Because they don't even realize how much the medication's helping them, perhaps.
Yeah. I think people
forget,
acclimate over time.
Once you've resisted something for a little while, you're like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Right.
Yeah. And before you know it, sometimes it's a shit show. So we're running short on time. So Robert, please tell us what would be like the most important closing thoughts that you would share around this topic. What are the things that you think people need to know and policymakers, regulatory bodies?
I think that the things that we're kind of fixated with the current opioid epidemic, and yes, it's been devastating, no question, but there's always been an opioid epidemic. It's just that now it's affecting white people.
That is correct. There's always been a drug epidemic, period.
What we have in this country is, an addiction problem, really.
Correct.
It just happens that the opioid epidemic is the latest iteration, but in the 90s it was crack, and by a couple of years from now, it'll be something else.
Meth is making a huge comeback. It's huge in Japan. Just kidding. It's not huge in Japan. It's huge somewhere else close to there. I'll look it into. West Virginia.
Hanging gardens of
West Virginia, Mountain Mama,
and West Virginia.
Take me home. I'll break into some John Denver for you guys. Country roads. You're welcome.
I mean, I think it's we have an addiction problem, right?
Right.
And it may be sex, it may be food, it may be achievement, it may be the gym, it may be achievement, it may be substance.
We try to balance an even addiction of all of those.
Right.
People like feeling good. That's crazy.
Right? Fucking weirdos.
Yeah.
Yeah, so finding the middle road and finding a way to kind of remove our own prejudices from how we view other people and just treat them kindly and compassionately as they are people who you knew and loved.
Yeah, lack of judgment, I find just being able to have a conversation with somebody is a game changer a lot of times. Just not putting that person in a box until you can listen to their story, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just supporting people
Love
without
your people.
expectation. Yeah,
Love
supporting
your
people
people.
without expectation.
Right.
Like I always tell people, it's really hard to garner compassion for behavior sometimes, so you need to garner compassion for what's driving that behavior, what's underneath it, because if you're trying to feel sad about somebody sticking a needle in their arm, you might not be able to, but if you know that they're doing that over all these other things that have happened in their lives, and if you knew how much they hated themselves, you'd cry when you watched them do that.
Right.
If you're a human being with a heart. So
This is
yeah. So, well, Robert, I want to thank you for coming and joining us
thank you
today.
for having me. Yeah,
great.
it's a
And,
pleasure.
Yeah, so we will look forward to having you again and having you come visit us.
Would love
And
to, yeah.
if anybody needs your services, how do they contact you?
They can give a call at our office, which is 801-852-9440. We're at utahaddictionmed.com. And we're on Highland Drive, and be happy to look after anybody who feels like they might even be interested in talking about it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
All right. Well, thank you very much.
my pleasure.
So we thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Therapeutic Madness. Stay mad, my friends.